Hey everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of your Weekly TheraTea Podcast. My name is Tell Williams, or Mr. Williams Pre-K. I'm a teacher, I'm a therapist, I'm a social worker, and over here we have our co-host.
I am Anne-Marie DePietro, and today I am still a nurse practitioner and attending a funeral.
We are attending a funeral today. We are attending the funeral of the word gaslight. Gaslighter.
Or maybe the improper
Gaslighting.
use of the word gaslight.
Yeah. We still need the term.
Yeah.
We just don't need it to be misused.
Yeah, probably not the word of the year like it was in 2022.
Which I will say, that's like probably around the time I heard the word starting to be used. And I was like, oh, it's like a new term, but it's not.
No.
And I was watching a movie from like the 90s or something like that. And someone used the word gaslighter. I'm like, or maybe it was the early 2000s, but I was like,
Yeah.
it's there.
I'm going to tell everyone where it's from.
I
And
can't
you're right,
wait.
it is much older than that.
I know it. Before we get to that, we're going to talk about someone this week who definitely has to take a chill pill.
Okay, I'm ready.
So did you hear the story about Jason Kelsey and his wife, Kylie Kelsey, in Sea Isle?
No.
Okay. So if you don't know who Jason and Kylie Kelsey are, Jason is a
Retired Eagles
fan.
football
Yeah,
player.
yeah. His brother's Travis Kelsey, Taylor Swift's beau.
But he is one of the best Eagles players of all time.
And like seems like the sweetest human. Yeah. So Eagles peoples and Kylie, they're married. So Memorial Day weekend, this weekend, Kylie and Jason, they were at dinner, and a couple came up to them, and they were like, hey, can we get a picture? And they're, yeah, no, like not rude about it. They're like, we're having date night, and like, they just don't want to get a picture taken, right? Family time. And this couple, like specifically the wife, gets like belligerent, and she is like, you'll never come to Sea Isle again. You're never gonna be welcomed here. And was like going off because they wouldn't take a photo.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so
where
then
was this?
Sea Isle.
I know, but where in Sea Isle?
Oh, I have no idea. Like it was like all over like the internet and TMZ and stuff. But then Kylie, I guess, during this like argument, told this woman, she was like, "You're drunk. I can smell it on your breath, and you're embarrassing yourself." And I thought that was like such a great clapback, because I was like, it's true, she's embarrassed herself, but that woman's got to be super embarrassed today, because like, no matter what the celebrity of the person is, they don't owe you anything, just like you don't owe anyone else anything. Okay, so let's get into it. Where did the term gaslight originate?
Okay, so there was a 1938 British movie.
Oh, damn, it's old.
The title of the movie was Gaslight.
Okay.
So the movie is about basically the term that I use, like, or what I used in my thesis about emotional abuse was crazy making.
Yeah.
So his goal was basically to have her committed.
Right.
So he kept turning the lights down, like taking the gas out of the lights and telling her like the lights were on.
Gaslight.
Yeah.
Like literal gaslight.
Yes.
That's where it originates from. The guy was so messed up. Or the movie was, the character, I don't know if it was a real person, that like he coined this term.
Yes.
That's wild to me.
It was called that because he was doing a bunch of stuff, but one of the things was that.
Gaslight.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so this makes sense. The definition of gaslight is psychological manipulation of a person, usually over an extended period of time, that causes the victim to question the validity of their own thoughts, perception of reality, or memories, and typically leads to confusion, loss of confidence and self-esteem, uncertainty on one's emotional or mental stability, and a dependence on the perpetrator, which I think is incredibly important, like distinction that needs to be made. What was the quote you said earlier about gaslighting, about like trusting?
It's the more that you start distrusting yourself, the more you'll trust them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like that's a good way of like taking the definition being like overly clinical and like if someone is making you distrust yourself more so that you put more trust in them, because that's like the thing. It's like you're putting more trust and you're not just believing them in that one instance. Gaslight.
Right. Yeah. And it's also that it's like a repeated pattern.
Right. And that's the thing. So the next thing is, what's the difference between gaslighting and lying?
I think there's a couple differences.
I do too. Yeah.
You start.
I don't necessarily think that gaslighting and lying, I don't think they're the same thing, right? I think when you're lying to someone, it could be like in that instance, and it's not to make them question reality, their perception of their mental health. It's not to have more dependence on you. I don't think it's at all the same. I think that gaslighting is a form of like hydro lying, but I don't think that...
Like deception.
Yeah, 100%. What do you think?
So you want... The gaslighter wants the person to distrust themselves to make their own decisions so that they'll make the decisions that are consistent with what the gaslighter wants.
Correct. And I feel like that's, again, like very different from lying.
Which is why after a breakup, it's so difficult to move past. Like, say someone like lied to you a lot. You know, I was with Bob instead of he was actually with Gina. And he did that all the time. Like lied to you about who he was with. Then you break up and that doesn't exist anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like he's not, you might like have a hard time trusting that, you know, someone's with this person they say they are. But with gaslighting, you're then going to question your own reality. And you have to learn to trust your own thoughts, feelings, decisions.
Absolutely.
Like when that relationship ends, you have to like relearn how to trust yourself, basically.
Exactly. And to not like lead yourself to feeling like you're going down a hole more of like bad mental health or like insanity sometimes. Like when you talk to someone who's been gaslit, like I have, you know, plenty of clients that I've seen who have terminated a marriage or whatever. And it's like, oh, there's a distinct difference between the two.
So someone lying about who they're with can be gaslighting.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, for example, I will give a personal example. I know everyone really likes the stories about the girl with the pen.
Yeah.
Okay. So she was a pharmacist and the pharmacy was in Maryland and we had each other's locations, right? So for some reason, I cooked dinner every night, like after I worked all day. So I would want to know like what time she left so that I could have dinner ready. So I would look at my phone, and during the day, the dot would be like in one area of the Walgreens, right? Presumably where the pharmacy is.
Right.
But then at the end of the day, like when it's late and I'm wondering where she is, the dot is now in the parking lot.
Right.
And so I'd be like, the dot, like, what are you doing in the parking lot? And she would be like, what are you talking about? The dot, like, I don't know where the dot is, but I'm in the pharmacy. I've been in the pharmacy the whole time. Yeah. Like, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I can't trust the dot.
the dot can't be trusted. Right. So that is gaslighting, because then it's like any time that you're using a GPS app and you're like, the dot's messed up.
Well, yeah, and it was making me feel like I was being paranoid.
Right. Which is like another shitty thing too, because like, depending on where you're at, right? Like, whenever I go to like, if I'm in New York or in Philly or in Chicago, like the dot is like spinning. Like the dot doesn't know where it wants to go. So the dot sometimes messes up, right? But in that even allows the gaslighter to use that against you to be like, oh no, it's that instance where it's getting messed up, but it's never done it before. Or when I go to the Walgreens and I'm walking around there, it very distinctly knows that there's a difference between 300 feet away or 400 or whatever, a whole football field away of the pharmacy. Right. And like, why are you hanging out in the parking lot for 3 hours?
I mean, I had actually been in the Walgreens parking lot looking at where my own dot was. Yeah. And then looking at my own dot when I was near the pharmacy. And then she would be like, no, like that doesn't happen on my phone. And that's why I felt like I needed to buy a pen recorder, because I felt like I couldn't trust myself. Like I needed it in black and white, because I was like, what is wrong with me?
When you're going there with your phone and looking to see, like, driving there separately for no other reason other than to look to see what that is, 100% that's you, like, questioning your own reality.
Yeah.
And then that's specific now.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it can figure out, like, what room you're in.
I know.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, I think that, like, you were 100% are being gaslit, and then continue that narrative of, like, I'm going crazy.
When my friends, or even like now, when Colleen like hears about like the relationship, everyone's like, why, like, did you believe that? Like, are you serious? Like, why did you?
Yeah.
I hate the term, why did you stay? But
yeah.
You know what I
100%.
mean? But like, I was like, see, Ruby also doesn't like
She was like, no, Ruby's
No.
like, we can't be doing this.
No, Ruby was like, Mom, you should have peaced out.
She's like, love you, but listen, ma'ams. I mean, it's
But honestly, it's a cycle of abuse, right?
100%. And you ignore the signs then because the person wouldn't lie to me.
Right.
Or like maybe my phone is more accurate than their phone. We have a different service. Maybe I upgraded my phone, or maybe like it's you just keep going and going and going and going, because that is sometimes easier because there is a dependency aspect of it, right? You want the person to depend on you.
Right.
It's like when we were saying earlier before starting the episode, like the difference between a man cheating on his wife and she said, did you go to the gym? And he said, yeah, I went to the gym, right? That's a lie. Gaslighting would be, hey, honey, did you go to the gym? I checked the GPS and it said you were at a house a mile away. And he was like, oh my gosh, the GPS messes up all the time. Why would you say that? I'm at the gym. And then follow it with but if you don't believe me, that's fine. You can leave me, go find a job or whatever. Like you want the person to then come back and depend on you. And it does, like, it made you question your reality so much you drove to the Walgreens to check yourself.
Right. And you question your reality, and then you get upset, and then maybe you threaten to leave, and then the person then like showers you with attention and positivity and I love you and I'm going to change and whatever. And I mean, she was doing that until the final moment.
Yeah.
Like, I distinctly remember she was sobbing downstairs. Like, this is the amount of control that these people try to exert. Sobbing. And I was like in my room, like talking to my ex-girlfriend who I ended up getting back with. We were broken up at this point.
Yeah.
She was still living in my house though. Vanderpump Rules for sure. And I like didn't respond, right?
Yeah.
I'm like putting that shit on extinction. Eventually she comes upstairs and she's like, you heard me crying and you didn't even come down and check on me? And I was like, no. Why would I?
Right.
And then she goes into this whole thing about like, I'm everything she ever wanted, and she realizes that now and whatever, and like going on and on and on, like sobbing. I'm sitting on the bed, she's like standing like by my dresser, and I was like, I'm actually already dating my ex-girlfriend again.
You're like, I'm done, babes.
Yeah.
I've moved on.
And then she, of course, had an episode, right? Like they flip out, lose their mind, and whatever.
Yeah.
But like that's like literally what has to happen to a gaslighter. You have to like literally extinguish them.
Oh, 100%.
Or set them on fire. I don't know.
Yeah, like you just either let the fire go more or less.
Right.
So what do you think the difference is between a gaslighter, a narcissist, and a sociopath?
So I think gaslighting as like an action can be done by narcissists and sociopaths. I think they both use it, right?
Yeah, oh, for sure.
But I think that some people gaslight and they're not a narcissist or a sociopath.
100%.
So you can have a gaslighter that doesn't have any of the traits of a narcissist.
Correct.
Right? Or doesn't have any of the traits of a sociopath.
Right.
Like, a sociopath is only doing things for their own benefit.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
And that's not what gaslighting is all the time.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Like, if you think about it, if someone's gaslighting because they don't want to break up the family because they're worried about their kids, this and this, a sociopath isn't going to worry about anyone. A sociopath isn't going to think of that, right? Of that aspect of it.
And I think with narcissism, a lot of times gaslighters have a really poor self-esteem, and they know that they do.
Correct.
Right? If you're a narcissist, you don't have any awareness of that. Like, you think you're the shit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And people who gaslight might come off like that.
Yeah.
Right? But ultimately, like, that's them overcompensating.
Oh,
so
for
there's
sure.
a difference between people who overcompensate because they don't want to show that they have such poor self-esteem.
100%.
And people who actually think they're the shit.
Absolutely.
And both gaslight.
And it's very seldom you will find a narcissist who will fake having low self-esteem, because that would even be beneath them. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that would be too much.
And I think there's like a distinction too, and I'm glad you said, like, you can gaslight someone and not be a gaslighter.
Right.
You can be narcissistic but not be a narcissist, right? Like, there's a distinction between someone having a characteristic of narcissism and being a narcissist. Like, that is a huge distinction, right? We can have narcissistic qualities, but to actually be a narcissist, if you've never...
Right. So I will tell you, this is one thing that I think is the most difficult part about identifying gaslighting and where it's misused a lot.
Yeah.
So if there's a scenario, I'll just use me and Colleen as an example. If I come inside and Colleen's like, I'm sorry, I didn't have time to empty the trash yet. Like, I'm going to do it in a minute. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my God, you're mad at me? I'm so sorry. Like, I just didn't have time. I just had this and this. And then she goes into all these excuses. Well, not excuses, but like she tries to rationalize it. And I'm like, I'm not mad.
Right.
Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And then, like, she's like, but I feel like you're mad at me. I'm really upset because you're mad at me, whatever. So I legitimately was not mad, right? So my experience was different than what she experienced.
Right.
So in that, it's really difficult because if you're trying to convince her that you're not mad, right, then are you gaslighting? Right. But I think what needs to happen is you recognize that you both have a different perception of the same event.
Correct.
And validate each other's experience.
Correct. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Otherwise, it ends up in this fight of,
two people not remembering a timeline distinctly remembering something differently, or perception of something is not gaslight. And I think that's the tricky thing. And we've talked about that before, just like the two of us, like in our offices, of like, Jason and I would get into arguments because I would say, well, we talked about this. He said, no, we did not. And I said, we did talk about this. And he's not gaslighting me in that moment. I'm not gaslighting him, because we would sit there and I say, because he would stop gaslighting me. I'm like, we had the conversation. And I was like, this is the issue I have with gaslighting. I'm telling you something that I 100% recall and remember. And because I'm trying to remind you of what I remember, but it's not something you remember, then that's not the intention behind it at all. I know that this happened, just as he truly believes it did not, or the conversation happened differently.
Right.
There's no ill malice intention between the two of us at all. It's a recall of something different. And I think that's the difference too, is people sit there, he's gaslighting me because he said he was here or this, and he wasn't. It's like, if it's intentional, covering something up, 100% probably maybe towards gaslighting or just lying.
I think you need to look at a situation and say, is this actually different perceptions of the same event?
Correct.
And is it possible that there actually are two different interpretations of the same event?
Yes.
Right.
And there are. A couple weeks ago, Jason's like, we're going to go, he said, what are you doing this weekend? It was like a Monday. And he said, maybe we'll go do this. I said, okay. Didn't talk about it for the rest of the week. Saturday morning, wakes me up and says, hey, we're gonna go do this. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, we're gonna go do this. I'm like, why didn't you tell me? He's like, well, I did. I said we're doing this on Saturday at this time. I said, no, you said we might be doing. That's like precision of language, Jonas. Like, what do you mean? This wasn't a definitive thing. But he's not recalling it that way. He's recalling it as, I've 100% told you about this. We're doing this, and then I'm feeling like someone's making me go crazy because I'm like, oh my God, wait, no, you said we might. And so in those cases, then we have to sit there and say, you have to be very precise because of my autism with language. You can't say, oh, it might be fun to go do this. It might be fun is different. Oh yeah, that would be fun. Than to say, I want to go shopping with you on Saturday. I think it would be fun. And we're gonna go.
Right. I'm
not getting that. So that's like, yeah, you have to sit with the person and figure out. And that's what makes gaslighting so fucked, is because gaslighters can do that. Big no. Like, we were talking about the girl on the train, if you've ever seen the movie. 100% very over the top example, but an example of that, right? Because this man's acting like he's the one going through the abuse, and really it was flipped around. Right.
Or like on Vanderpump Rules with the whole Scandival, right? Like, everyone's trying to or those two
Yeah.
are trying to convince everyone, right, that what everyone's seeing is not the reality.
Right.
So they're like manipulating it so that the other Tom
Yeah.
looks like he's the one with the crush on her and whatever. Like they manipulated that entire situation to make everyone question their reality
Right.
of it.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of the reason why Ariana's just like done.
100%.
You know, and she can't face that yet because she's still at the part of recovery
Right.
where she has to learn how to trust herself again.
Well, because listen, when you have an entire like show, and we're not just talking about like the players there, we're talking about producers, we're talking about camera people, we're talking about everything, convincing you of one thing and finding out that like none of it's true, or that like the gaslighter was able to convince all those people, and then maybe when those people like I've never seen an episode, but I was like constantly scanning to be like, I want to get as much as I can out of this because it seems juicy. But like eventually people are realizing it's incorrect, or that they were wrong, or that they were lying, and they continue to do the lie for the sake of the TV show continuing, or the juicy drama continuing, and they get in all this like publicity. After that place, when you're the one in the room sitting there and you see an entire group of people that were maliciously lying and gaslighting you, baby, you gotta go. Yeah, that's shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And I think that, you know, recognizing an event like that as trauma is really important.
Right.
And I really do think that, like, this whole drama, I know the reunion aired this week.
Yeah.
I just watched it this morning. And, you know, there's all this talk about, like, should Ariana have walked out at the end, or should she have filmed the end of the episode? And Ariana says, like, I want this to be authentic, and if we weren't filming, I would have walked out at that point, right? Because she's protecting her own emotions there. Now, is that, like, healthy?
Right.
It's healthy that she knows she has to remove herself at that point
Absolutely.
and work on it, right?
100%.
Like, as long as she's working on it in therapy and not just avoiding it.
Oh, for 100%, right? And again, we've talked about this, like, we don't owe anyone our mental health, right? If we don't feel like it's a safe or good spot for us, like and we are reevaluating and doing the healthiest option, again, we're not avoiding, baby, walk, you know? So because of like examples, and I think a lot of people watch Vanderpump Rules, right? Or if they've seen Girl on the Trainer, what do you think, or who do you think is more likely to be susceptible to gaslighters, right?
So I think that empathic people are very susceptible to gaslighters because you inherently want people to feel good, to do well. You want to be there for them. You want to take care of them. You want to fulfill their needs. And that's very easy for a gaslighter to come in and set expectations that they want you to follow.
Absolutely.
Right? And then when you inevitably don't follow them the way they want, which will happen because it's impossible to, you know, do everything perfect, then it's like you're already in it, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I must help them.
Right. No, 100%.
So what do you think?
I think that anyone who has a history of being abused is more susceptible, because I think they're already in a space of not believing themselves, or to have that kind of dependency. And I think it's
codependence.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's people who a lot of times like lack confidence, right? And I'm not talking about in a way that's like you're self-conscious. I'm talking about people who like have horrific ideas of self, because you are way more likely to be like, you know, I'm wrong. Or if you don't have high self-worth, then you're like, it's not even worth fighting for. Yep, I'm crazy. And
or you feel like you can't be alone, because then it's like, well, I could either be alone or I could just deal with this.
100%. And I think that like, it's also important to know that even with those characteristics, like the shitty thing about gaslighting is usually it's someone that you love or trust or respect or value. And that's the difficult thing, because anyone then can be gaslit, like at all. Like you don't have to meet a certain qualification at that. These are just people that are like more susceptible to. The hard thing is too, is I think also just being in mental health is being able to spot some gaslighting. And again, like sometimes we're wrong. I've been wrong, you know, in my relationship, and you know, my husband, like, here's a text. I'm like, I just don't remember sending that text. You know what I mean? What do you think are some of the signs that if you have a friend or a loved one that's going through it and you're like a third party perspective of it, like what do you think those like sure signs are?
So I would say that I usually identify like 4 main red flags that people tend to ignore, right? And you and I were talking about this earlier, so you can help me with the list. Number one, and these aren't in any order. They can happen in any order at all. Number one is if they start talking about their exes as if they're all quote unquote crazy, quote unquote psycho, quote unquote terrible.
Yep.
Every single ex is terrible except for you.
100%.
So then they're putting all the pressure on you to be the quote unquote normal one.
Right.
So then you feel like you have this expectation of, well, I don't want to be crazy too. Well, I don't want to be psycho. I don't want him to think I'm like them.
Yeah.
Like,
I have to be different.
Run.
Right.
If every ex is crazy, run. Now, most of my exes are crazy, but I have one that's not. So that's why it's not a red flag.
But here's the thing too, and I'll make the distinction, is if someone is saying this, right? If someone's like, we broke up because they just like this, or this, right? But if they're like crazy, this, I would say, why? What happened then, right? Mm-hmm. But it's and if the person on X, maybe it's like a family member gaslighting you, or a good friend or whatever, then I'll also ask about the other people in their life. Oh, my sisters and my mom and everyone's crazy. Now, I'm not saying that people don't have fucked up families that aren't great for them, but if you're seeing a consistency of everyone in their life is crazy, or the friends that they have, also feel like it's kind of a buy-in of that. Very seldom is that one person. There's a pattern somewhere, babes. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And I also think it's very telling just in general, the way people talk about their exes. Like to just say, oh, it didn't work out, or they weren't good for me, I wasn't good for them, we were super toxic together, is very different than, oh, they're psycho. It's like, okay, well, like, what happened? Mm-hmm. Like, because if they're just like, oh, well, they were crazy, they were doing this, and they were constantly following me, and they didn't, believe me when I said I was where I was at.
They started dating each other after they met putting a cat to sleep.
Listen, anytime that you are finding romantic interest while putting a cat to sleep, and it's not a rom-com movie, and it's the veterinarian.
Yeah, no.
Baby.
There's a problem.
Number two, I liked really, calls you dramatic or says you're too much.
Oh, that is probably my favorite on my top 4 list of red flags. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime. We talked about the too much thing before, too, which is just a really hurtful thing to say to someone, but the dramatic thing.
Right.
Right.
What I will say is these red flags need to be occurring in the context of all of them, like together.
Yes.
Because there is a dichotomy between men and women where women are considered quote unquote too much or dramatic, like in the workplace or something. So that dynamic definitely exists.
Right.
So when I say this, it also occurs outside of gaslighting.
Right.
But in a romantic partner who's saying that to you routinely in response to your feelings, that's usually not a gender
and
thing.
Like we said this before, like we were talking about emotional abuse can also be gaslighting, but it also doesn't have to be, right? So if someone just come up to you saying like, oh, you're so dramatic, or stop crying about this or whatever, like that's abuse. That's emotional abuse. Gaslighting is emotional abuse too, but it doesn't have to occur. Not all emotional abuse is gaslighting, right? And like some of these separate is really shitty emotional abuse. Together, like you were saying, as if it's all like occurring together as a thing.
There's shades of gray too, right? Because this has been happening lately, like it happened a couple times this week. That's why I'm thinking of it. But Colleen said something where she thought that I was upset or something like that. And I responded with, I think you're being too sensitive. And so I think that was the wrong response, but I think the intent behind the response was right. So what I really should have done is like validated her experience of whatever the action was, and then just given my reality, which was I wasn't upset at all. I was feeling happy that I came in the house and didn't have work to do, whatever. Instead of sensitive, because I think that can be also used as a gaslighting word.
It's all about the ability and the I think mental bandwidth to do the communication, because sometimes we just don't have it in us, right? To sit there and just be like, it's so much easier for somebody to be like, okay, I think you're just being sensitive right now. And that might be what is happening. But to sit there and be like, I totally get what you mean, because I know a few weeks ago I came in and I didn't want to tell you something was wrong, but that's not this case. But I can see why in this situation you would think that. I'm super happy to be home and not have work and validate it that way. But that takes so much energy sometimes, or when you're constantly nagged about it and you can't come up with that, then sometimes it just falls out. Jason will tell me all the time, don't tell me how I'm feeling, because I'm not feeling that way. And instead of being like, you might be reading that because I'm really agitated because of work and because of your past history with, you know, emotional abuse of your stepdad and stuff. You're reading me accidentally slipping the cabinet, shut too loud as being upset. I'm not. But he gets upset if I'm telling him how he's feeling. I'm like,
and then you get upset because he's not validating your experience.
And I'm like, but you are mad. And I was like, I'm mad now because you've been asking me for 20 minutes what's wrong and nothing's wrong.
Right.
Or it has nothing to do with you and I'm totally fine.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's just you guys not communicating.
100%.
And I think, like, we all gaslight to some extent at
Absolutely.
some point.
Right.
But I think the difference is, do you intend
the intention
to gaslight?
Behind it
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the intention behind it and the dependency,
Right.
I think, is the huge thing of that.
Right. And are we accidentally invalidating our partner's feelings?
Oh, 100%. Because maybe we're frustrated or whatever, but there's no intent behind it. And I like, this goes into great with number 3, right? Because you saying, I think you're being sensitive, right? Is not what is what might be happening, but not what you want to say. So we were talking about consistently and maliciously putting down someone's mental health. If you're constantly feeling like your partner, your friend, your family is constantly putting down your mental health and saying, like, you're being too dramatic, but more than that, you're crazy. Oh my gosh, you need to go see a therapist. Why do you think this? Yeah.
You need medication. Is your medication right? You need to do something.
Yeah. And this is the thing too. Someone can ask that in a kind, gentle, genuinely concerning way. You know, hey, you wanted me to make sure that if you were getting really agitated towards the end of the day, Jason did this for me. If you're getting agitated towards the end of the day, to let you know, because then maybe they need to do something with the Vyvanse versus the Adderall so that you're not a raging dick at the end of the night because you're frustrated or whatever. And that's something that I've talked to you about all the time, like how I didn't know this was a major symptom, right? And so there's a gentle way of being like, hey, like, let's discuss this, and not you need to up your meds, or you need to go to your therapist and talk about this, and like the person recusing
Especially
themselves.
when it's regarding a situation that the gaslighter has already gaslit them about.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So, you know, like when I'm sobbing, like, over, you know, a commercial for tissues or something at the house, and then I start crying because I dropped something on the floor.
Right.
Like, for Colleen to be like, Anne, did you, like, miss one of your medications today?
Yeah.
Like, the experience that I was actually sobbing
Yes.
and actually dropped something on the floor is different than, like, getting upset that your partner said that they were going to go to this party with you and then totally ditched you. And, you know,
why are you taking your medicine? You wouldn't. This is nothing to cry about.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Right.
Yeah.
And this is the other thing too. And I tell my clients specifically.
And I do miss my meds when that happens, by the way.
Oh, if there's times that Jason's like, did you take your meds today? And he knows I didn't, because last week he goes, did you take your meds? I said, yeah. Why? He goes, you cannot tell a story or like say words right now. I have like the apraxia where like my mind and the words don't, I mean, you have to know this because my God, do I get tongue tied. And if for some reason the Adderall and the Vyvanse helps with this a lot. I don't know if it just calms my brain enough that they can match, but if I don't take it, Jason was like, what word are you trying to find? And I'm like, I see it and I can't even spell it out for you, but it's not coming out. But I mean, there's a difference between, and I tell a lot of my clients with bipolar disorder this, you can still emote, be upset, angry, pissed off, sad, happy, without it being bipolar disorder.
Oh, for sure.
And so many people, specifically clients with bipolar or BPD, are told, oh, this isn't a emotion that anyone else would feel. It's because of your mental health.
Or you're manic.
Yeah. No. Yeah. People can have these feelings and it have nothing to do with their diagnosis. And that is, if someone is using your diagnosis consistently maliciously against you, fucking run.
Right.
Run.
But, and I'll say on the opposite end of that, it's okay for you to understand that if you start screaming at the top of your lungs, sobbing, and throw yourself on the floor, like, and that's related to your borderline personality disorder or borderline traits, it's okay for you to recognize and 100%. Explain to your partner, like, this is something that happens to me when I can't tolerate distress. It's not who I am. You know, it's not bipolar disorder. It's not a manic episode. This is like a distinct thing that happens. I recognize when it happens. You know, like those things, I think on the other side.
Yeah.
That's why like communication's so important. Like, you know.
Because then if you're talking to your partner about if this happens, this is the way I deal with it, right? I always tell this, and I used to be embarrassed about it and I'm not, but I would used to like smack myself quite a bit. And I stopped for a while and then it came back. And Jason, like I was doing something, I was talking and he heard me like this. I'm not smacking myself hard. It's not hurting me, but I'm just kind of doing that. And he was like shocked. It was something I mastered since I met him. I did it all the time, but I've done it since I was a kid. But it's one of those things that, like, had I been honest to talk to him about, it probably wouldn't have, like, frightened him. There's no gaslighting or anything like that. But when we are honest about some of our mental health issues, and then we talk to our partner about, if this happens, can we do this? Can we talk about it this way? Can you check in with me like this? Mm-hmm. And you've had the discussion and the partner is specifically not doing it, right? And you've been telling them how to do it. That's another sign that they might be trying to gaslight you, right? Mm-hmm. Because they know how to handle the situation in a way that makes you and them feel better or good or understanding of it. And if they're ignoring that purposefully, mm-hmm. you said this is what we do in this case.
Or they're trying to make you feel like what you're saying is happening to you isn't actually happening
100%. The fourth one is so crucial. Mm-hmm. And you're the one, you came up with this and I was like, mm-hmm. If you're the only one constantly apologizing, I don't think I've ever been in a relationship, an interpersonal relationship, whether that's, friends, family, colleagues, where one person's always in the wrong.
No, never.
So if you feel like someone else is going to make a mistake. Mm-hmm. So if you're the only one ever apologizing and everything is your fault and you made the mistake.
Or if you're apologizing a lot.
A lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that could be a sign that someone's been gaslit in the past. Like, Colleen says, I'm sorry after, like, many things. And I think it's, like, a good sign that mm-hmm. there's been some gaslighting trauma.
When Jason apologizes to me sometimes it is the quickest way to deflate an argument between us, because I do this thing where, like, as a way of, like, not teaching empathy, but to really feel the empathy, is I'll imagine someone, if I'm mad at them, of what they looked like when they were a kid. And then it makes me feel like, oh, you can't be mad at a child, right? But with Jason, he told me about, like, middle school and growing up, and, like, kids were super mean and bullying him. And I think of him eating lunch alone in middle school. And it just, like, so when he apologizes to me and it's something he shouldn't apologize for, or it's, like, something that he did and it's a response of, like, being gaslit or, emotional abuse or whatever, it instantly makes me be like, please stop apologizing. Like, a huge thing I like to do, which is so cliche and whatever, is teach your friends. I've tried to teach myself to thank people instead of apologizing, right? So if you are a little late to a meeting, right, but everyone else has been late to a meeting, and it's not it's not the end of the world. You're 5 minutes late. Rather than say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, this won't happen again. But, hey everyone, thank you so much for holding for me so we can do this meeting together. I'll try to be on time, leave the house early or whatever. But, like, in some cases, apologize if you're 25 minutes late and people are waiting. But, like, mm-hmm. that's just a case of, like, trying to relearn. Mm-hmm. And then it'll really help you. If you can't find a way to say thank you about something, then you probably just have to apologize, mm-hmm. right? If there's no alternative to saying I'm sorry, mm-hmm. maybe you were in the wrong for that. But if you were saying I'm sorry every 20 minutes of every time of the day, or just anytime there's an argument.
Well, I think also, like, taking a step back and saying, like, am I actually sorry?
Yep.
Like, can you explain, like, what you did that you wish you hadn't done mm-hmm. that had, like, an unintended impact, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
So if I, like, snap at Colleen because, like, I'm trying to post a TikTok and it's not working, and she's, like, trying to talk to me and I'm trying to post the TikTok, like, and I apologize, I'm apologizing because I shouldn't have snapped at her because I wasn't mad at her. Right. I was mad at the TikTok.
Exactly.
Right. But if, like, Colleen came in the room and, like, I was just on TikTok, like, doing my thing, and she, like, gets mad that I'm on TikTok, right. I'm not going to be like, I'm sorry, because I'm not.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean?
Right. Like, if you're like, hey, can I have 30 minutes to go do this? And you're given a need and then they're breaking that need or whatever, then I'm not sorry. I'm frustrated that you're not paying attention to what I had asked that I needed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, or if you can't find a reason, like, I don't like to apologize for something that I don't feel bad for, because I think that's a shitty thing to do. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, granted, I'm working on not being overly apologetic because I tend to do that. But, like, if I'm definitely in my bones being like, I can't figure out why I have to apologize for this, without being shouldn't be like, I'm sorry that you're upset, right? Then I think that's another time of stepping back and saying, am I being gaslit? Or do we have to have more communication so I can understand better why then? And if you're not getting to that conclusion, either you're an asshole or maybe you're not in the wrong.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
And I think like the phrase "I'm sorry" could be a whole other episode. To be honest,
there can be an
we
entire
could
episode
probably
on
have
like
a funeral for "I'm sorry."
Yeah, like how to properly apologize would be like, because listen, there's a begin, there's a middle, there's an end of how to properly apologize. This is like the anecdotal part, right? So like I was trying to think of times, because I don't want people to think that like the holier than thou, like, oh, I could never be gaslit, because I mean, we've talked before about being gaslit. So the thing I can think of best is like my ex stepfather, because my mom's dead, so they're not married anymore, was super manipulative, big old gaslighter, horrific, right? And when my mom passed away, I was like, okay, Jason had just moved back to school to finish his PhD. So I was like, we'll save money. I'll move in with my parents. A few months later, my mom dies. And so my stepdad is trying to convince me that it'd be better for me if I stay there, right? Because like it'll work out better and I can save money, blah, blah, blah. But then starts, after getting, an insurance settlement from my mom and blowing it on him getting a DUI, he then is asked for rent money. I want to be helpful, though, totally fine, right? Because he's telling me all these bills that he has, blah, blah, which, like, in hindsight, didn't exist. So what would start happening is I'd give him cash, and a week later, he's like, hey, you didn't pay rent. I was like, yeah, I did. I paid the rent. The rent he was asking for was almost the exact same amount of what I had to pay out in 20s that I'd take out in cash to go pay my car payment. That he knew how much my car payment was. So he'd say, no, I would give a receipt. I'm like, no, right here, it says I went to Key Bank and I took out, $370 or $380. Like, yeah, no, that was for your car payment. I never got it. And so I would like, okay, I kept doing it over and over and over. But then what he would do is when I would be like, I'm going crazy, I have to move out, I'm giving him so much money a month and this, and this, then something would happen where I'd have to stay. And he would just, like, something would happen with him. And he, one time accidentally left the oven on. And so when I came home, it reeked of like carbon monoxide. And I was like, oh my God, so he could have died. Or, there were so many things that were happening that I was like, I felt like he's in worse shape than what he is. I'm constantly giving him money, but he's saying I'm not. So like, I must be like, and I would go to the bank to see if I made my car payment. They're like, yeah, but like, then why do I have 4 transactions of the same amount? I felt like I was going absolutely fucking mad. And then by the end of it, I was like, wait, I am. Like, I'm going crazy because none of this shit's happening. And so I was like, this is exactly where I was as a kid growing up. This is exactly where I was, most of my adulthood with him. And I was like, I'm missing the signs that I knew. I need to, like, not excuse anymore and leave. But it took, even now, like, I will second guess everything I do, or I am overly empathetic to someone who I can see is going through a tough time because I think, oh my God, they're probably really going through it. And I'm like, oh, cool. That's something that we're really going to have to work on, because when your entire childhood is that, it's fucked.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a lot to unlearn, even if it's like later in life relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
That's why I think everyone should have a couples therapist and a regular therapist.
100%. Yeah. Because I think it helps you work through a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, and I think that like a lot of these anecdotes too are helpful, because if your therapist or someone who's like, really into the mental health field, and they're saying like, I've been gaslit, or like, I don't know, it makes you feel less lonely to know that like literally can be absolutely anyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that kind of brings up like, why would we have a funeral for overusing gaslighting, right?
Yeah. If we've all experienced it or whatever.
Like, why is it important to use it properly? And I think one of the reasons is because gaslighting that's not actually gaslighting can probably easily be repaired by improving communication.
Correct.
So you don't want to consistently get in this loop where you're arguing with your partner thinking that they're gaslighting, you're calling each other gaslighters, when really there's a communication deficit that can be filled, right?
Right.
And with a true gaslighter, you can't change them. Like, you could try to convince them, like, from here to Sunday that they didn't give you the money that they said they did.
Correct.
Right? But you're never going to convince them of it. They're never going to admit it to you.
100%.
So that can't improve. All you can do is change the way you react to it.
Well, and the intent behind it, right? Like, this is a huge thing that Jason, I will distinctly remember conversation Jason wouldn't. And it got to the point where I said, no, we were driving down the road and we were by Michael's and I had said this. And then I said this and Jason be like, okay, so then Jason's starting to realize if he's remembering that much stuff, we might be having these conversations. And then there's one time I said it and he's like, oh my God, I do remember this. And it was like a light bulb moment for us where he was like, I think this might be an ADHD thing. Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah. So he's like, if we're having a thing about an event or that we have to go do this or something, like, also text it or write it down or you remind me several times. But I could have easily sat there and been like, oh, he's just gaslighting me, because that is a term that we have all been hearing, all been using. There was no malicious intent. He was not trying to make me dependent on him and stay and all that stuff. But because I had heard the term gaslight so much, I started being like, oh, this is a malicious, evil thing. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't. It was literally us saying, we're not communicating the way that best fits me or you.
We had that conversation, in real life.
Yes, because I was like, I will sit there and be like, this, and this. And now, like, I don't have the anxiety if I'm telling him something important that is he going to remember and say this didn't happen, because now he's like, okay, yeah, can you text that to me? 100%, right? Mm-hmm. But, like, when we overuse a term and it becomes a placeholder for lying or a placeholder for someone genuinely not remembering or a communication breakdown, that gets really toxic.
Of opinion.
100%, right? Mm-hmm. That gets toxic. That gets pretty dangerous pretty quickly too, because if I am being told that someone, Bobby, is a manipulative gaslighter and gaslights everyone in the world because that's what his ex is saying, but you talk to Bob and he was like, I just don't listen when people are talking, so I don't remember things. Like, that's very different. Get better about listening, but like that's a completely different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or you might just have different opinions about like things in general.
Right.
Like, is it cool to be late to a party or not?
Right. Oh, 100%.
You know what I mean? Right. Like, I'm not gaslighting you if I'm like, no, I like to be on time at a party, and you're like, I don't think it's a big deal to get there 15 minutes late.
Right.
You know what I mean? If I'm like, no.
Right.
You need to get there.
And then person's like, you're uptight, you're always like this, you're this, and this. Right. It's very different than me. Like, oh, I just like move out of, like, I wouldn't want to be at the party right at 8 when it starts, because that's overwhelming to have 20 people show up at one time. Right. I want to, you know what I mean? It's a breakdown of preference.
Yeah. You just have a different opinion.
Where do you think, like, and how do you think it started getting overused?
That's a great question. I mean, it has to be with social media.
Yeah.
I think it started out of people talking about narcissistic personality disorder.
Yes.
And because there was then a huge overuse of narcissistic personality disorder. I got so many patients' parents being like, do you think my child has narcissistic personality disorder? Or this person's a narcissist, that person's a narcissist. And so I think it got labeled on social media as narcissistic abuse. Mm-hmm. But what people were trying to attack was gaslighting.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, like, those people who were truly identifying someone they thought was a narcissist may not have been a narcissist, but they may have been a gaslighter.
Yes.
So then when you're identifying gaslighting in that context, then people are picking up on that.
Yep.
Right? And then anytime you disagree with someone and they try to, like, say the opposite, they're gaslighting.
Right. And again, like, to have a disagreement with someone doesn't mean that either person's gaslighting or there's an intentional gaslighting or a malicious gaslighting, right? Like, and I think I think a lot of it is the internet. And I think that what I love about social media is that it has brought so many people, myself included, to realize, like, oh, I need to check in with my own mental health because I'm not doing great, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's given us a lot of language we can use. It's given a lot of us communication techniques. But what it also has done is allowed us to overuse or conflate things. And I think that when we are saying there's a difference of opinion, or when someone is lying, and not just lying, lying can be traumatic. One lie can be very traumatic, and it's not gaslighting still. But, like, it takes away the meaning and the heaviness of gaslighting then. And when someone comes to me and they're saying, I would just lie to a bunch of this and this, and I have to sit there and say, you were gaslit, right? Or the opposite. It's important that we are knowing why and how it is being used, and not overused because someone said it on TikTok and you're like, oh, okay, that's gaslighting.
Right. Have you read TMZ this week? Like, scrolled on TMZ to see what the news is?
Not a lot of it. What's happening with
About
MS?
Bam?
Yes. Married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that had me like thinking about Bam just today in general.
Yeah.
And, I was talking to his fiance anyway, but thinking about gaslighting, she and I were actually just having this conversation. And I really think that a lot of the treatment providers, a lot of like the public, gaslit Bam into believing that he was just an addict.
Yeah.
So there's this like complete ignorance of important aspects of his mental health that led him to where he is.
Yeah.
That then he just feels like a piece of shit. And
Right.
who wants to feeling like a piece of shit addict that everyone's told him he is, from treatment provider to treatment provider to treatment provider and the entire internet, like where do you go from there, right? So no one's looking at it like Bam was a kid with ADHD who created Jackass because he was hyperactive, impulsive.
Right.
Jackass was created because Bam had ADHD, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, nothing's more stimulating.
Right.
Right.
It fed that need that he had for that hyperactivity, for impulsivity. I mean, and that's what Jackass was. It was hyperactive and impulsive from the time he was, 10 years old until he was 30 years old. Right.
Yeah.
So that happens, and then Jackass ends.
Yeah.
Right? But the ADHD doesn't end.
Right.
And then what happens? Then drugs come into the picture. And then uppers, guess what? Uppers treat ADHD.
Right.
So now he's bored. He doesn't have anything to do.
Right.
He's not doing Jackass. His ADHD is raging. He's irritable, right? The way that you and I have felt when our ADHD is untreated. And now someone's offering you drugs that make you feel better. Okay, so then we follow that trajectory. Then, around that age, mood disorders can present, right? But at this point, we're complicated by the fact that there's substances involved. There's ADHD involved. And now there's mood changes happening that are involved. But they're distinct mood changes, okay? This continues in a pattern for years and years and years, a decade probably, where no one's actually recognizing that there's more to this than him being an addict. Right. And it almost was to the point where like it was convincing me he was an addict. But then I was like, I would literally be on the phone with treatment providers, with interventionists, with his friends saying like, this is a mental health issue and I don't understand why no one is talking about that, because he feels like a piece of shit. Well,
we have to in a lot of these cases, people are relying on you for an income, entertainment, to be re-signed for something. There's a benefit of almost having control or being able to manipulate that person in that way, right? So like that 100% probably some of it was like if we can feel like we can mitigate or switch the problem or make the person dependent on XYZ or whoever, then that keeps us in a place of like privilege, in a place of like closeness to that person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's 100% medical, entertainment providers, like all of that. Like I feel like there's specific places, cases, areas you can be in where it just breeds the idea of gaslighting and to manipulate someone for sure. And he definitely was gaslit.
Yeah. And that pattern just like repeats. Like once you get into it, that's like really hard to break.
Yeah.
And I think now what's happening is he's unlearning that.
Yeah.
And I think that what needs to happen in that process of unlearning, like that's where healing is going to come. That's where healing with his mom and dad's going to come.
Absolutely.
That's where healing with other people in his life that didn't have bad intentions will eventually come in. But Bam has to trust himself first to make his own decisions and have his own opinions.
Yeah.
And being gaslit for so long, you don't have that. He doesn't have that.
Yeah. You have to retrust and rebuild your self-worth and believe that you're worthy of those things, because it's hard work. It's not easy.
Right.
And you have to surround yourself with people who have the best intentions for you to help you get to that spot too.
Right. 100%. And I think that's what he's doing. And of course it's complicated and it's been complicated, but at the end of the day, he's alive.
Yeah.
So.
And that's great. That's like the best outcome that could have happened in that situation too, is just that he's like on a better path and people are finally like listening and understanding. And like you said, remembering it's a mental health thing. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And how dangerous gaslighting can be when we're not actually like recognizing
Right.
what's going on with someone.
Yeah. And I think that's why, like, the idea of the funeral and putting gaslighting to rest isn't like we had said at the beginning, not putting it away, but
Because it's a very serious thing.
It's putting the social,
Colloquial.
like entertainment. I'm angry at someone, they're gaslighting me, and that sense of the overuse way of going about it, because that is something that has to be done and buried, because it in the process of you validating a singular moment you had with someone, of an argument and a misunderstanding you might have had with someone, you're invalidating so many other people's experiences, because they have been there and they have been gaslit, and they're like, well, if that's gaslit, what I'm going through, what is that then? Right? Baby, that's gaslighting. Someone's lying to them, someone's just being an ass, right? That's why I think it needs to be buried.
Right. And then how do you trust anyone?
Yeah. It's hard.
Like
Where to get back that?
all has to be rebuilt.
Yep. Got to find the therapy. Got to find the friends, family, loved ones that will allow you to rebuild.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge topic that we'll talk about with Bam in our podcast.
Yeah. I think it'll be good.
Few weeks.
And allow him to, like, say what and everything he needs to say in a space that's accepting and has the background of mental health and communication in mind.
I mean, if you look at Bam in the media at all, he has really very rarely, if even one time I can think of, talked about his own mental health.
He's being talked at or about.
And identified as an addict.
Yeah.
I have not seen 1 ounce of sympathy for his mental health struggles, but we have a lot of sympathy for other celebrities' mental health struggles.
For sure.
And, with substance use, we have to appreciate that comes from mental health. Absolutely. It comes from trauma.
Yeah.
I didn't even get into his best friend dying and being ripped from his life.
Right.
So of course, I have a lot of empathy, but I think we all should have empathy
100%.
For someone in that situation.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that the podcast can give an opportunity to talk about some of those things so that it's less of a he said, she said, Bam against this person, that person. And we're really just talking about Bam and how he feels and how he's felt and where he wants to feel moving forward. Because I think healing of loved ones will come in time after that.
For sure. I think so. Oh, yeah. That's one of the things that will be here in season 2 is we'll talk to Bam. We'll be interviewing more people.
We'll talk to Mrs. Margera.
Yeah. It's going to be a fun season, a new season. I'm excited about it.
Me too.
We have a lot of fun things coming up, guys.
Oh, and some guests, some other patients that have emailed me that they want to come on.
Yeah. That are
therapists.
Yeah, that have become therapists and want to advocate and talk about their story and give people little droplets of, hope and
One of them's actually working in my actual office. Like her office is a room that used to be my office.
That's funny.
Like she used to come for
appointments. It's like a full circle moment for like.
She used to come for appointments to that office. Isn't that wild?
And like now is giving the appointments.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Love it.
Oh my gosh, thank you for joining us for our first episode of the second season.
Yay.
If there's specific things you want to hear about, topics you want us to discuss, let us know, write us, comment, DM, all those things. And we'll see you next week, babes.
Bye.
Bye.